All right, welcome back for another episode on how I made $1 million from trading. In the first two episodes, I covered two pillars that I thought were extremely important in my journey, and that was energy and concentration. So if you haven't checked out those videos, I'll leave a link in the description. Those two pillars, I believe, are really the stepping stones in order for you to get to the level that we're going to talk about today, which is clarity. Now, when I think about clarity, what does that mean to me? It means somebody that really has their process and edge down. They know exactly what they're doing, they know how to fight out of tough spots, and they know what to do when the market doesn't go in their direction and when it does go in their direction. And they're not second guessing their decisions. They know exactly what they need to do. And how do you get to that specific level? And really I'm thinking about is there's this aha moment in my trading that came about, and it came through a lot of trial and error. So the first two parts of this trading journey, right, energy and concentration, that may take a very long time, and you might not ever get to this stage of clarity. But if you want to be able to get to the stage, it really requires you to go through those trials and tribulations in the market on your own. Because I could tell you all about my experiences in the market, but I cannot transfer that experience to you. So just put it this way. Let's say if I am a professional athlete and I'm trying to guide and tutor a new amateur athlete into the higher ranks. I could very easily tell you how to play the game, specific techniques that you need to use. But when you step on the field, and let's say you step on the field with zero experience in the pro leagues, and all of a sudden somebody passes you the ball, you don't know what to do. You're kind of like a deer in headlights. Yes, you can think about all these things that your tutor had mentioned to you, your teacher had mentioned to you, but unless you have that game time experience, it's not going to translate. So when you're in a state of uncertainty, that really just comes from not knowing what you're doing in specific situations. So eventually you'll get to that point, but how do we get to that point? And the problem that I think most people have is they think that there's this one aha moment that clicks for them, and then all of a sudden they become a master at this craft, right? Trading, for example. And that's not necessarily the case. If somebody had to ask me when my turning point was in trading where I just all of a sudden figured it out, it's very hard for me to say, because along the way you're going to have these small aha moments, and then those small changes compound over time, and then at some point you're going to piece it all together. And that's where I think the real clarity comes from. And you have to think about this from a bigger picture perspective. So let's just go back to trading basics, right? We need to understand a technical strategy. We need to understand a little bit of the fundamentals. We need to understand risk management, and we need to understand psychology. So managing our own self and our own emotions. Now, when you're getting into trading, you're not really a master at any of them. So let's say if you start studying technical analysis and you're studying it for 3 months. Well, what happens when all of a sudden you face a roadblock where you don't understand the fundamentals, or maybe you don't understand the risk management, or maybe you don't understand the psychological aspect? Now, all of those pieces need to be sharpened as one big toolkit in order for you to have that full clarity. And when it comes to clarity, it means you absolutely know in every situation when the market trades against you, when it trades in your direction, when it's consolidating. You need to be thinking from a clear state of mind, and that really only comes with experience and confidence, knowing that the decision that you're going to make next is the right one. Now, when it comes to clarity, this is where I think journaling has such a major impact on your trading performance. Because if you're not writing anything down, you're not really learning from the mistakes that you're making. And over time, if you go back and read your journals, it's going to provide more and more clarity towards that big picture goal. And our big picture goal is to become a full-time trader and make $1 million. So along the journey, if you're taking proper notes, and if you're actually spending the time to reflect on your performance, that's kind of where you start building the good habits that will eventually lead to mental clarity. So it all starts with journaling everything about your trading. At the end of each day, not only should you be journaling your trades, you should be journaling how you feel, things that you did during the day, and just overall, how you're feeling throughout the day. That is extremely important, because you're going to find these different behavioral patterns in your trading. And honestly, that's really what trading is about. It's about behavioral patterns. If you have poor behaviors, and if you're over leveraging, if you're over trading, and then you're not journaling at the end of the day, what are you really learning from that experience? When we stop and actually reflect on these mistakes that we're making, that's providing additional clarity towards our goals. Are they aligned with what we want out of the markets, or are they not? Now, there were a couple different turning points in my trading journey where I got a little bit of clarity at each stage. So let's talk about technical analysis first. I think technical analysis really is where a lot of people's journeys start and stop. There's always something new out there that you can possibly study, and there's always something out there that you think is an edge that you might be able to add to your system. And what I had to learn the hard way was, over the course of many years, I was constantly trying to find something to tweak into my system, to add it in and try and improve that edge, when in reality, it was actually hurting my performance. So this cycle went on and on on for years and years. I studied every single system out there that you could possibly think of. I'd studied price action, I'd studied trend lines, I'd studied volume, RSI, you know, all the moving stochastic indicators, things like that, trying to find the perfect tool to add to my system. And let's just say that this period took 7 or 8 years. Now, why did it take so long? So I would find a technical system and then I would trade that system in the live markets for 3 to 6 months up to a year. And what would happen was I would get towards the end of the year and start to see a little bit of consistency, but it wasn't the performance that I really wanted. So even if it was a break-even system at the moment, I didn't stick with it. I kind of ditched it because it wasn't making me money, and I had spent all that time and all that energy going towards that system, and I really just gave up on it before I was able to actually get it going. Whereas if I just stuck with that same system, I might have been profitable the following year or the year after that. But I got in this vicious cycle of trying to find the next best thing, and when I jumped to a new system, right, it's like you're starting all over again. So not only did I get really close to having that mental clarity, right before I did, I had to start all over again. And that's where all the confusion starts piling up, and it just gets worse and worse, and it's this vicious cycle. You're learning more things, it's unknown to you, you're going back in, testing it, it's not really working, and then right before you're about to figure it out and you're about to make it click, you try and jump onto the next thing. So when did this actually stop for me? Now, everybody knows me as being an ICT trader. I've got to be honest with you guys, the only reason I stuck with it was because this was like my last shot at trading. I had already tried every other system, I had already tried so many different things, and it was really just me being sick of going through that cycle over and over again, and I just needed to dedicate myself to one specific strategy. I'm not saying that ICT is the only strategy that you can use, but my clarity, my point of focus where I was able to see clearly the path forward was to dedicate myself to one specific strategy, regardless if it worked up front or regardless if it took forever to try and figure out. I just needed to stick with it and be dedicated to it, which I had never done before in the previous, 7, 8 years. So after I joined ICT's mentorship, I was still not profitable. It took me 2 to 3 years even after I started studying his material before I actually started seeing traction and understanding what I needed to do. But at the end of that period, when I got a little bit deeper into the mentorship, so I was already a charter member for 2 or 3 years, I had that aha moment, that mental clarity where that said, all right, I've seen this work. I've seen this strategy work over time. Now I have to focus on the other aspects of my trading. All right, so now technical analysis has been covered. So I had a technical edge, but I still felt like I was missing a piece of the puzzle. And that really came with the fundamentals. And when I really noticed that these fundamentals were taking shape was really around COVID and the Ukraine war, when I really started seeing markets move in the direction from a macro standpoint, a macro trend standpoint, that made sense with what was going on around the world. Now, I know there's a lot of technicians out there and a lot of technical analysts that say you don't need fundamentals, but the biggest macro trends that I've seen really do come from these major global impacts that we see across the world. We had COVID, we had crypto. So if you're only a technical analyst and you don't follow the fundamentals, what's going to happen is you're going to be trading inside of some weeks and you're not going to be really aware of the calendar events. Now, when I started laying my technical analysis over the calendar, that's where I gained another level of clarity towards my trading. I started to see moves occur before specific news events. I started to see consolidations occur ahead of specific news events, and I started to see expansions occur after specific news events. And then at the end of every week, I would actually sit down and plot out the news events over the chart just to see the effect that some of these economic events had on the markets. And I found that when I went back in my journal, a lot of times where I was taking losses or being overzealous and over trading, many times it was on days that were leading up into a major news event, or it was right before a major news event, and I would end up taking a loss when really there wasn't a setup there until after this release had come out. So many times you're going to see markets wind up right before something like FOMC or CPI and NFP. You might see markets consolidating all week ahead of NFP. And these economic news releases really do tie in with your behavioral patterns, because when you start trading in a way where you've done the reps, you've already traded X amount of FOMC weeks, you've already traded X amount of CPI weeks, you start to get in the flow of how the market is operating around these news events. And when you've seen these patterns pan out over and over and over again, which again takes many years of live study, that's where you get additional clarity in your trading. All right, so now that we understand a technical strategy and how to overlay that with the fundamentals of the market, let's talk about the risk management. This was one of the last pieces that I had to figure out because it was something that really was holding me back. I just didn't have consistent risk. I was, risking 1% on a trade that looked really good, good. And then on trades that looked really bad, I was getting overconfident because maybe I had a winner prior to that, and I would size up twice as much, 3 times as much, without recognizing that I was having such a poor impact on my performance. I would go up 2% and then give it back on one trade, or I'd go up 3%, 3R, and then give that back on one trade, which is 1R, right? So not having that consistent risk management and that consistent position sizing, my P&L graphs were kind of all over the place. So in order for me to get clarity of that, I needed a large sample size. And I know when you're going through trading, journaling is probably the most boring and tedious things to do at the end of every day. But you just have to sit down and do it, because you're not going to understand how you're tracking performance-wise until you do. And then let's say over the sample size of 50 to 100 trades, you're recognizing that your P&L is having these massive volatility spikes. So you may be going up 5%, up 10%, back down to 0%, because a lot of people probably think, I'm up 10%. I can risk this. That's fine. And then what they don't realize is that cold streak is just right around the corner. So not only are you just giving back all the work that you had done, you're putting yourself into a mental rut because you just took a massive loss, which puts you on tilt. So what I had to learn was when I was going up on trades and I had a hot streak, that I kind of had to take my foot off the gas a bit. What I wanted to do was kind of take that account flip mentality and just keep trading and flip it into more money. But I guarantee you, if you just stop focusing on when you're going to make that $1 million and when you're going to make that first 100K, if you just focus on consistency across the board, so that's consistency with your technical analysis, the fundamental analysis, and then your risk management, which is probably one of the most important things, then it's all going to come together at some point. But I'm telling you, from my experience, you have to be able to focus on each one of those aspects separately and work on them separately. And this takes time. When I was focusing on my risk management and I wanted clarity in that one aspect of my trading, I could not be bothered with new technical analysis. So people reach out to me all the time and like, have you checked out this indicator, or have you checked out this new method? And to be honest, when people mention that to me, I kind of just shut off now. I don't even listen to what they're saying because I know my edge works. It's just, I have to be able to consistently come to the markets without getting distracted by this new shiny object that's in the corner of the room. And really, that's how you're going to achieve the clarity that I'm talking about right now. You have to be able to say no to certain things. So new indicators, you have to say no to. Sometimes even news headlines, you have to say no to. You have to think objectively, and then you have to put it all together at the end. So the final piece of getting clarity in the markets really is your psychology. And everybody hammers this topic all the time. They say psychology, you need to focus on psychology. But what people don't realize is you're going to have terrible psychology if you don't have an edge. So you can have the best psychology in the world, but if you don't have an actual edge, you're still going to be confused. But let's spend some time and talk about clarity as it relates to psychology. Now, do you have people in your life that you question the decision that they're making and you try and provide them advice, and no matter how much advice you provided them, it's almost like they have this fog over their eyes and they just don't listen to you or don't want to make the specific changes? Now, this part of trading is really the dark side of trading. There's just some traders out there, no matter how much you tell them to do specific things, no matter how much you tell them they should be focusing on specific things, they just don't do it. And it's not because they don't have good psychology, it's because they're letting their subconscious make the decisions for them. And personally, I think a lot of traders are just in denial. Now, let's just use this as an example. You have this one friend that has a shopping addiction, and they don't even know they have a shopping addiction. They're spending all their money on things that they don't need, clothes, materialistic things that they just honestly don't need. And no matter how much you try and get them to stop, it's like they have the blinders on and they just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. Now, honestly, there's people out there that never master their psychology. And this is where trading gets so difficult, because I don't think many people are even cut out to be able to become a full-time trader, let alone make $1 million. If you want clarity with your mental state, you have to be introspective. You have to be brutally honest with yourself if you want to make it in trading. Now, whether most traders want to admit it or not, a lot of them are really just procrastinators, or they just don't want to make the change. Subconsciously, you might be thinking, well, I'll manage my risk on the next trade, or I'll journal my trades next weekend. And the longer you put that off, the longer it's going to take for you to recognize that you're actually doing something wrong. So I think a big reason why traders don't really make it is because they honestly don't know what type of person they are. They don't know if they should be a swing trader or a scalper. They don't know if they're short-tempered. They don't know if they have patience or not. And until you actually are brutally honest with yourself and can say, I'm an impatient person, I'm a greedy person. A lot of people are not willing to admit that, so they never make the change in order to improve. And maybe that's because what they think in their mind is that there's nothing wrong with them. So usually the mind that you bring to trading is not the mind that succeeds in the markets. Now in this industry, it's mostly male dominated, and I think the fact that we're trying to all be alpha males, we have this egocentric personality about us, and we don't like losing, that creates so many obstacles when you're trying to become a good trader. We let our ego and our feelings kind of drive our decision making, and we think that what we're doing is right, and we're gonna just bash our head against the wall until we get it. So that leads me into my aha moment when it comes to psychology, and really it's just that the markets are uncertain. The only thing that we can control is our actions. And when I had to put that into perspective, I just thought to myself, all right, I've built this strategy, I've built out my risk management parameters, I've built everything out. I have clarity in all these other aspects. And then the final piece of the puzzle was really just submitting control to the markets. And yes, it's going to sound weird because when it comes to clarity and the markets, really there's just nothing that's clear about it. But that last piece is really the ultimate piece of the puzzle. It's accepting that the markets are uncertain. The only thing that we could do is control our actions around what we're doing in the marketplace. We cannot control if the market's going to go to our take profit. We can't control if it's going to hit our stop loss. And what happens is when things don't go our way, we get frustrated, we go on tilt, we start doing dumb things. And I would say that's the majority of people out there that are just normal people. It's just part of the human emotion. So again, that last piece of clarity when it comes to psychology, it's really the fact that you're not in control of anything other than yourself. So to summarize, if you want to know what you're doing in the markets, just think of all these different aspects that I've talked about as little building blocks for you to become a profitable trader. And not only that, somebody that's able to make $1 million in the markets. You can't have these dull areas. Let's say if you're just a master at technical analysis and everything else is terrible. You don't understand fundamentals, you don't understand risk management, you don't understand psychology. Well, it's not going to work. You need to be proficient in every single one of these areas to have clarity of the markets. So if you were to plot all these different aspects on a timeline of your trading career, you might have different aha moments at different points in your career that provide that understanding of what you should be doing in the markets, what you shouldn't be doing, you know, some of the mistakes that you made in the past. That's all providing experience, and experience is the greatest teacher in the markets. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something about my experience in my journey to making $1 million from trading, and then maybe you can take some of the things that I've talked about and implement it into your own trading. If you like these discussions and want to learn how you can work directly with me, check out the link in the description. Otherwise, leave a thumbs up, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel as I'm dropping more free value every single week, and I'll see you guys in the next video.